have Congressman Jerry Nadler, who is here with us today. He'll be at the panel. Councilwoman Darlene Mealy is here from Brooklyn. She's here with us today. The mayor from Buffalo, Byron Brown, good friend of mine, is joining us as well. Got a strong contingent from Buffalo here in the House. And the Democratic leader for the Senate, Malcolm Smith, will be joining us shortly. So I just wanted to make that statement. But also, when I come out again, just please make sure that everybody is seated when I come out so that we can get the program moving as quickly as possible. The question on the press will be here initially just to take a series of pictures to get what they need to do out of the way first, and then they will move to the back so that you can enjoy Reverend Sharpton and Senator Obama. They won't be in your way.
We have had a very important and impressive convention this week. The Reverend Al Sharpton has led us with clarity and precision, and on the strength of his own engagement in the political arena, we have been fortunate to have all of the candidates of the Democratic Party visit us. It is my pleasure then to present our president, the Reverend Al Sharpton, President of the National Action Network, at this time.
Y'all, these photographers in the front, we really didn't come to see y'all, so y'all. Yeah. First of all, let me thank all of you that have been here all week for the convention and for all of our delegates. We will hear in a moment from the last of the candidates. We are glad that all of them have come, and let me state, as I've said in presenting all of them, that there must not be different standards in American politics. If it is appropriate, and it is, for John McCain to go and address Reverend Jerry Falwell and his constituency. If it is appropriate, and it is, for Rudolph Giuliani to go to Pat Robertson and his constituency. It should not even be questioned whether Hillary Clinton or John Edwards or Senator Barack Obama ought to come to our convention. We must have a nation that everybody is in the discussion. And let's recognize members of our national board and our chapter leaders around the country. It is my honor to introduce to you a young man. I call him young because we ain't that far apart. In fact, Ed was older than both of us, right? And they called him the young guy. A young man I met several years ago as he began running his race for Senate. And he is a man that has stirred a lot of excitement and passion in the American political establishment and, more important, the masses. As we embark on a new century, it is important to us that we have leadership in this country that understands the people of the country, not just the powers that be. And I want to say, everybody say, which way are we going to go? Any one of the 6 candidates running would be better to me than the one that presently sits in the White House. They all bring their unique contributions, and they all bring their unique attributes that would lead to the healing of this nation. None more distinguished than the next speaker, someone I've gotten to know over the last few months. We've spent a lot of time talking by phone, a couple of times in person. He's a man that is candid. He's a man with vision. He's a man that I feel can earn the trust of people. We have built a relationship where we don't have to agree on a tactic, but we agree on direction and can be candid with each other. I don't need people to make me feel better. I feel we need people that can make us do better. I bring you the Senator from Illinois, Senator Barack Obama.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. That's all right. You're going to have some time now. Let me thank Charlie King, Dr. Richardson. Most of all, let me thank Reverend Al Sharpton for bringing us all here together today in the Urban Action Network. I am proud to be a candidate for the presidency of the United States of America. But I am mindful that I wouldn't be here if it had not been for Reverend Al Sharpton running for president, and Carol Moseley Brown running for president, and Jesse Jackson running for president, and Shirley Chisholm running for president. They paved the way, and I stand on their shoulders. And I'm proud to acknowledge that debt that I owe. I appreciate Reverend Sharpton for being a voice for the voiceless and a champion for the dispossessed. And as we saw last week, he's still on the front lines, fighting a good fight. And we are thankful for his energy and his willingness to challenge the conventional wisdom. I'm also thankful that Reverend Sharpton has built this organization because what he understands is that change in America doesn't happen from the top down. Change happens from the bottom up. Change happens when millions of voices set the agenda and hold those in power accountable to move that agenda forward. And that's why I'm so proud to have an opportunity to address all of you here today. And I congratulate all the grassroots activists, all the folks in the neighborhoods on a day-in, day-out basis who are knocking on doors and making phone calls and standing on picket lines and stirring things up. Because without that activism at the local level, we're not going to bring about any change at the national level. And the reason that I'm particularly appreciative of Reverend Sharpton's building this organization and recognizing the change comes from the bottom up is because that's how I've lived my life. That has been the principle around which I have entered into politics. Some of y'all don't know that I actually used to live in New York City. I went to Columbia University. And got my hair cut uptown.
There we go.
Went to church once in a while uptown. Did some organizing at city colleges up on Amsterdam Avenue. And when I got out of college, I realized that I wanted to be a part of something larger. I had been inspired by the civil rights movement. I remembered those young people straight back, eyes clear, sitting at the lunch counters and marching on behalf of their freedom. And I had been too young to participate in that, but I was reminded that the opportunities that I had benefited from had derived from the efforts of those young people. And so I'd become active in the anti-apartheid movement on my college campuses, and then decided that's how I wanted to spend my time. And so I wrote to every organization around the country that might be willing to hire somebody out of school. And I got to admit that most of the organizations here in New York didn't reply to my inquiries, and I'm not sure I could have afforded to live in New York anyway on a community organizer's salary. But there were a group of churches on the south side of Chicago that had come together to deal with the devastation of steel plants that had closed all across the region. Tens of thousands of people had been laid off, black, white, Hispanic. Homes had been foreclosed, commercial strips had deteriorated. And so these churches, recognizing that it wasn't enough just to pray, decided to take action. They came together and gathered up the little money they had and formed an organization, and since they didn't have enough money, the only person they could afford to hire was me. So they gave me, I still remember, they gave me $13,000 a year and some car expenses. And so I bought a little raggedy car and I drove out from New York City to Chicago, didn't know a soul. And for the next 3 years, I worked with these churches to set up job training programs for the unemployed and after-school programs for youth, and try to bring city services into communities that had been neglected. And I've always said to people that was the best education that I ever had, because what it taught me was that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they're given an opportunity to shape the direction of their lives. Now, after 3 years, I went back to law school, got my law degree. And there's something humming down here. That's Blackberry. Watch out. That's Sharpton's Blackberry. Is that Hillary calling? I was just checking. Breaking my flow. Say, Russ says it was my wife. She told me what groceries I got to bring home tonight. All right, where was I? I was in law school. Southside, $13,000, went to law school. Came back, and because I had done well in law school, I had an option to go to some of the Wall Street firms and make a lot of money, but I decided I still believed in that principle of working at the grassroots level. So I spent the first year out of law school organizing a voter registration drive and registering 150,000 new voters to help Democrats get elected in 1992. And then I started a civil rights practice, and I represented people who didn't have a voice, represented folks who had been discriminated against on the job, African Americans and Hispanics and women, represented African Americans whose votes had not been properly counted and who did not have an opportunity to meaningfully participate in the political process. I started teaching constitutional law, seminars on race and the law at the University of Chicago Law School. And after a few years, a Senate seat where I lived opened up. And some people asked me, because they knew of my community activism, whether I'd be interested in running for the state Senate. And I did what every wise man does under such circumstances. I prayed on it, and I asked my wife. Amen. And after consulting those two higher powers, I did what every first-time candidate does, which is I talked to every person who would listen to me. So I'd go around and I'd go to the PTA meetings and I'd go to the block parties, I'd go to the barber shops and beauty shops, and everywhere I went I'd hand out literature and folks would look at it and they'd say, okay, so you're running for Senate. They'd have two questions for me. First question, where did you get this funny name Barack Obama? Although they wouldn't say it right, and they'd call me Alabama. Or they'd call me Yo Mama. And I'd have to explain my name's Obama. And my father was from Kenya, from Africa, which is where I got the name from. And then my mother was from Kansas, which is where I got my accent from. But the second question bears on today. Because the second question people would ask is, you seem like a nice young man. You've got a fancy law degree, could be making a lot of money, you teach at a fine law school, you got a beautiful family, church-going man. Why would you want to go into something dirty and nasty like politics? Why would you want to go into politics? And the question is understandable because at some level, all of us feel cynical about the political process. Even those of us who are involved in it feel cynical about it because we get a sense that politics has become a business and not a mission. That power, especially in Washington, is always trumping principle. That we've got a lot of leaders who are long on rhetoric but short on follow-through. And so over time, we get discouraged. Over time, we start feeling as if what happens in the public arena doesn't really make much of a difference. Maybe every 2 years, every 4 years, we vote, we hold our noses, choose the lesser of two evils. But we don't really have confidence that government is going to make a meaningful difference in our lives. At most, we hope that it does us no harm. But what I said to people in that first race, and the same thing that I've said in this political campaign, this presidential campaign, is that there's always been another tradition of politics. There's been a tradition that says that we're all connected as a people, that we've got a stake in each other. As I said at the 2004 convention, if there's a child in Harlem that can't read, that makes a difference in my life, even if it's not my child. If there is a veteran in Chicago that is foraging through a dumpster because he's homeless, because he didn't get the proper services that he needed after serving this country, that diminishes all of our patriotism. That basic notion that I am my brother's keeper, that I am my sister's keeper, that is part of what has built up America at every stage. We like to talk about our self-reliance and our individualism, and that's a good thing. But what we have to also talk about is the notion that we're one community, that we've got some ties to bind us together, that we can't rise up if some of us are still down. And it's that principle that got me into politics in the first place, and that's the reason that I'm running for the presidency. Now, Reverend Al mentioned that he and I have had some conversations. And one of the things that I have said to Reverend Sharpton is that I absolutely agree that I should not get the support of the African American community simply because I'm African American. I don't believe in that. That is not what America is about. If I get support from the African American community or the white community or the Hispanic community, I don't want it to be because of my status or what I look like. I want it to be because of what I've done and how I've lived and the principles I stand for and the ideas that I promote. And that's why when I come before the Urban Action Network, I want people to focus on those things. Where I've been, what I've done, how I've operated. Because the fact of the matter is that I have not just walked the walk. I have not just talked the talk. I have walked the walk throughout my life. You know, these issues that the Urban Action Network talks about. National. Action Network talks about. They are not just the issues of a campaign. They're the causes of my life. At every juncture, they're the things that I've worked on. So let's talk about some of those issues. We know that we've got a healthcare system that's broken. that's bankrupting families and bankrupting communities. We know that it's affecting all of America, but we also know that it is particularly hitting hard on African American and Latino communities. We know the statistics. We know that 2/3 of the folks who don't have health insurance in this country work every day. Some of them work 2 jobs and still don't have health insurance. Now, during the presidential campaign, everybody's going to come up with a proposal to provide health insurance to every single person. But let me tell you what I did when I was in the Illinois Senate. Let me talk about how I provided health insurance to thousands of children who didn't have health insurance. How I helped to bring Democrats and Republicans together to provide health insurance to parents of children who did not have health insurance. I can talk about how I fought against insurance companies who were price gouging the uninsured, charging them more than folks who had health insurance, and how we helped to work to reverse that. I can talk about how we worked together to reduce the price of prescription drug for senior citizens in Illinois. I don't just talk about it, I've done it. Everybody talks about the criminal justice system and how it has not always treated people throughout America equally. Well, I don't have to just present a proposal about what I'm going to do, Reverend. I will talk about what I've already done. In the Illinois legislature, I passed the first in the nation law requiring videotaping of interrogations and confessions in capital cases, so we wouldn't have 13 innocent men on death row in Illinois. I passed the first law requiring that we monitor racial profiling in Illinois, prohibiting the practice. I don't just propose, I've actually done those things. I know that everybody here is concerned about ex-offenders. We hear some talk during campaigns about the fact that we've got hundreds of thousands of young men and increasingly young women who are coming back into our communities each and every day. And that if we don't do something about it, there is no way that we can overcome and rebuild our communities. There's no way that these men can be fathers effectively if they are not only imprisoned, but then placed under an economic death sentence for the rest of their lives. Well, I haven't just talked about these things. I've actually done it. When I was in the Illinois legislature, we passed laws to make it easier for ex-offenders to gain gainful employment and to become barbers and to become people who are able to work in various industries around the state. We know about voting rights, that our parents and our grandparents, they didn't march and they didn't submit themselves to fire hoses and imprisonment simply in order for us to have ordinary law-abiding citizens intimidated and deceived into not being able to vote. And that's why not only as a lawyer did I file suits on behalf of those who had been disenfranchised, but I also passed laws and have introduced laws right now in the United States Senate to make sure that we make those deceptive practices a felony throughout America. That we cannot have a situation in which people are being told that they cannot vote. So when I talk about these issues, these aren't issues that are new to me. These aren't issues that I just decided to start talking about as a presidential candidate. And I think it is important for everybody who is in this network to examine people's track records and make certain that they know that everybody's track record. And what I have said to Reverend Sharpton, and I will say here today, if there is somebody, I don't care whether they are white or black, whether they're male or female, if there is somebody who has been more on the forefront on behalf of the issues that you care about and has more concrete accomplishment on behalf of the things that you're concerned about, then I am happy to see you endorse them. I am happy to see you support them. But I am absolutely confident that you will not find that, because there is nobody who has stood fast on these issues more consistently each and every day than I have. That is something that I know. Now, let me say this. We know what the challenges that confront us are nationally. I already spoke about some of them. We got a healthcare system that's broken and bankrupting not just families but also our government. We've got an education system that, despite the sloganeering, is leaving too many children behind. They left the money behind for No Child Left Behind. And we are not preparing our young people in order to be able to compete in an international economy. We know that we've got the absence of an energy policy that leads us to send $800 million a day to some of the most hostile nations on earth. And that, in addition, also is melting the polar ice caps and changing the climate of the planet. And I know that that may not be something that we think is important on the south side of Chicago or in Harlem, except we should remember that typically when you have these forces like climate that shift, the people who are hurt are the poor. The people who endure famine are those in Africa that are most vulnerable. It is people who have the least that end up being impacted. We know that we've got an economy that has never been better in some places. You go down to Wall Street and take a look at some of those bonuses folks are racking up. That we've never seen higher productivity among our workers, that we are seeing enormous corporate profits, but everybody here knows what's happening among your neighbors and your friends, that the majority of families all across America are seeing a situation in which day in, day out, they are living paycheck to paycheck. That they're seeing their gas bill go up, they're seeing their electricity bill go up, they're seeing college tuition for the children go up, they're seeing gas prices at the pump go up, they're seeing their health care go up, but their salaries aren't going up. Their wages aren't going up. And so we understand that we've got an economy in which the burdens and the benefits of a global economy are not being spread evenly, and too many people are being left behind. And then we've got a war in Iraq, a war that should have never been authorized, a war that should have never been waged, a war that's costing us $500 billion, a war that's cost us over 33,000 lives, and that has made us less safe, that has diminished our standing around the world. Remember what I said, don't just look at folks who talk the talk, ask who's walked the walk. In 2002, I stood in front of 3,000 people, Reverend, in Chicago, and I said this war is a bad idea, that it shouldn't be authorized. I did it when the war was popular. It's easier to talk about the war when it's unpopular. I talked about it when it was popular and said that this is the wrong course for America to take. And so we know what the challenges are, but ultimately what we also know is that despite all the talk, nothing's going to change unless we change our politics and unless we change what's happening in Washington. Unless we get over a small and a timid politics, a politics that's based on who's up and who's down, a politics that's based on slash and burn negative ads, instead of a politics that's bringing people together to actually solve problems. There is nothing that we can't accomplish if we're able to forge the kind of coalition that all of you are trying to forge. But we are not going to be able to do it if we run politics as usual. That is something that I'm absolutely convinced about. If you are waiting for somebody to get elected to the White House and save you, it will not happen. It is only going to happen because all of us, millions of voices, decide we are going to save ourselves, that we're going to pull together, that we're going to organize, that we're going to mobilize, that we're going to march, that we're going to talk about these issues in a meaningful way. And so let's talk about what we can accomplish. On health care, we know what we need to do. We know that if we provide preventive care so that children like my daughter who have asthma are getting regular checkups each and every day instead of having to go to the emergency room, then we will save money and that child will be healthy. We know that if we give every single person who's got a chronic disease the kind of care that they need, so that if somebody's got diabetes, that they're getting the medications they need each and every week. Then we're not going to have to pay for the $30,000 foot amputation. We will save money. Those people will be better off. We can take that money and we can create a system in which every single American has affordable health care in this country. That is something that we have had enough talk about. Every 4 years somebody talks about universal health care and nothing happens. And the reason nothing happens is because the insurance companies and the drug companies are writing the health care bills, and that is why all of us here have to get organized and mobilized to make sure that by the end of the next president's first term, by the end of my first term, we have universal health care right here in America. We know what we've got to do in terms of education. We know that if we put $1 into early childhood education, that we get $7 back in reduced delinquency rates and reduced costs in terms of incarceration for our young people. We know that. And yet we still have millions of children who should qualify for Head Start that we haven't gotten enrolled in Head Start. There is no reason why we can't pay for that. If we can spend $275 million a day in Iraq, we can't find a little bit of money to make sure that we're investing in Head Start right here in America. We know that the single most important factor in terms of education are our teachers. And yet our teachers continue to be underpaid, disrespected. There is no reason why we should not have an entire new movement to recruit and train and retrain an entire generation of new teachers. We've got to pay them more, and we've got to give them more flexibility in the classroom, and we've got to come up with assessment tools that actually measure progress in the classroom. Teachers are happy to be held accountable if they are given the respect and the money and the tools that they need in order to educate every child and not just some children. We know that we can deal with the energy crisis. There's no reason why we can't increase fuel efficiency standards on cars. We have the technology right now. If we had 43 miles a gallon on every car in America, we would have to import zero oil from the Middle East. None. And if we had to import zero oil from the Middle East, Reverend, you know what would happen to our foreign policy. We might not be ending up sending hundreds of thousands of troops over the Middle East every time there's a problem. We know that in terms of our economy, we can boost the minimum wage, we can increase the earned income tax credit, we can lay down broadband lines, not just in downtown, but all across urban communities and in rural areas all across America, so that they have access to the internet. And we can make sure that our children are able to afford a college education, which is why the first bill I introduced when I got to the United States Senate was increasing the Pell Grant level so that every single one of our children can afford to go to college. Right now, 200,000 children don't go to college every year because they don't have the money to go. So the problem is not that we don't know how to solve our problems. The problem is that we have not set the right priorities. And the only way we're going to do that is to change our politics. And the only thing that is holding us back is that we don't have confidence that we can actually change things. And that is what is at stake in this election. It's also why this network is so important, because we're not going to be able to change politics unless we also do a little bit to change ourselves. You know, one of the things that I always say to people is that government can solve a lot of our problems. But government can't solve all our problems. And Reverend Sharpton has talked about that. You know, we were just talking in the back about what happened in terms of Don Imus and the nonsense that had been spoken on the radio. Now, we can have the FCC and others talk about how we enforce the various laws to restrict statements that are made, but the fact is we've got a First Amendment. What we have to do is make sure that all of us are not supporting the degradation of our women. That we're not, you know, I know that there's been a little contest between the rappers and Reverend Sharpton about what's appropriate and what's not. Let me say this. I haven't just singled out the rappers. I've said I've heard those words around the kitchen table in some homes. I hear them in the barber shop. I hear them on the basketball court. We all know that all of us have been complicit in diminishing ourselves and engaging in the kind of self-hatred that keeps our young women and our young men down.
That's right.
That's something that we've got to talk about in this election. What do we have to do? What kinds of responsibilities do all of us have? I am willing to fight to make sure that we change funding in education, because it doesn't make any sense that some schools get twice as much money per pupil as others. And that's a law that has to change across the nation. But I also know that it's not going to make a dime's bit of difference if we put more money in the schools if when children come home from school, we're not willing to turn off the television set and make sure that child sits down and does their homework. And we're meeting with our teachers. We've got responsibilities too. We know that our community has been redlined, that insurance companies and drug companies are not investing in our communities, and that's important. But I also know that we could transform our communities if we supported our local businesses.
That's right.
And if we kept, one thing always gets me mad, Reverend, when I'm driving through the south side of Chicago and I see folks throwing out garbage on the streets, along the commercial strips, that's something that we've got control over. Nobody wants to shop where there's 40-ounce bottle broken up. That's something that we've got to talk about. Most of all, something that I want to talk about during the course of this campaign is the responsibility of fathers to their children. I've introduced a fatherhood initiative in the United States Senate that is going to provide more support for fathers so that they can support their children. But I also know, as somebody who grew up without a father in the house, that ultimately a government can't force a man to live up to his responsibilities. And that is something that we have to all take upon ourselves, and that's something that's got to be spoken about during the course of this campaign. So here's the upshot. There's going to be a lot of talk during this campaign about what George Bush hasn't done. And we know what that list is. We know it's a long list. And there's going to be, every single candidate can lay out a greatest hits of how George Bush has failed America. We will talk about Katrina and how we had our fellow citizens standing on rooftops. We can talk about this disastrous war in Iraq and how, as a consequence of that war, not only have our young people suffered, but America's standing in the world has suffered and has to be transformed. We will talk about how the corruption in no-bid contracts have left billions of dollars unaccounted for, billions of dollars that could have been invested in schools and bridges and hospitals all across America. We can talk about those things, but ultimately, what I want to spend talking about is where we go from here. What kind of future can we paint for our children? Can we create an America in which all of us come together to make certain that every child has a decent shot in life, to make sure that folks aren't bankrupt because they got sick, to make sure that everybody can find a job that pays a living wage, to make sure that our senior citizens can retire with some dignity and some respect, to make sure that we lead with our values and ideals. That's going to be just as important as talking about George Bush. A while back, somebody came up to me and they said that they were so proud of my race, so proud of the campaign that I was running. And they said that, their son, who was 13 years old, was for the first time paying attention to politics. And said that seeing me campaign had made that boy think differently about what was possible. And I understood what he was saying, and I understood it from the perspective of that boy. Some of you saw that I went down to Selma, Alabama for the 42nd anniversary of the march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And it was a magnificent event celebrating John Lewis and all the others who had marched across that bridge, not knowing what to expect, being turned back by the horses and the billy clubs and the tear gas, and having to stagger back and regroup, and having themselves reminded by Dr. King that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice, that we have to keep on striving for something better. And as I was there marching and standing on that bridge, and Reverend Sharpton was there, and others who had participated, I thought about how I had been inspired by those young people when I was a young person. I thought about how the reason I had ended up traveling to Chicago was because of the actions that they had taken. I thought about how each of us, generation after generation, pass on this idea of a better America. And when I got back to Washington, some people patted me on the back, Reverend, and they said to me, you know, that was a nice speech you gave, and that was a wonderful celebration of African American history. And I had to explain to them, no, you don't understand, that was a celebration of American history. Because at every juncture in American history, that's how changes happen. Because ordinary people were willing to imagine not just the world as it is, not just complain about what was taking place, but also were able to imagine something better. That's how it has happened each and every time. That's how this country started, because a group of patriots decided we're going to start a new kind of government of and by and for the people. And we don't believe in taxation without representation. That's how we got rid of the scourge of slavery, because a group of abolitionists decided to stand together and said to themselves, you know what, we do not believe that it is appropriate to have a Declaration of Independence saying all men is created equal at the same time as we've got our fellow men and fellow women in chains and shackles. That's how women decided that they were going to get the right to vote. I know one day a woman was sitting across the kitchen table, and she looked at her husband and she said to herself, you know what, I'm smarter than him. I don't know why he's got the right to vote. And she started talking to her friends, and they all started marching and organizing and mobilizing until women got the right to vote and became full partners in this process of freedom. That is the way that the civil rights movement perfected our union. That's how workers mobilized in the unions, because they knew that unless they came together, they'd never get a minimum wage or a 40-hour work week or overtime pay. Every juncture, it's been because of you. And so let me just close by saying this. I am confident in my capacity to lead this country. I believe that I can transform how America sees itself, and I believe I can transform how the world sees America. I believe that I have the experience, not just in Washington. Folks talk about experience in Washington. Well, I've been in Washington long enough to know it needs to change, but I've got the experience. I've got the experience of working in impoverished communities and know the hopes and dreams and aspirations of those people. When I talk about changing our foreign policy, I've got the experience of standing in my father's village and talking to my grandmother and listening to her stories about all the people who died of AIDS and malaria. I've got the experience of fighting on behalf of folks who needed somebody to fight for them. And so I'm confident about my ability to lead, but I can't lead by myself. I can't change America by myself. I'm going to need all of you to be involved. This campaign has to be a vehicle for your hopes and for your dreams. And if it becomes a vehicle for that movement for change, then it can't be stopped. If it becomes a vehicle where all of you decide that we are going to have health care for every child, we will have health care for every child, and we will turn the page. If all of you decide that we're going to have an education system that works for every child, then I guarantee you that we will have education for every child. We will turn the page. I sense all across America a desire for something new, a desire to turn the page, a desire to write a new chapter in American history. And if I have all of you working with me, then I guarantee you that not only will we win this election, but we are also going to transform America. Thank you very much. I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Senator Barack Obama, let me say this. In the next 15 minutes, our Politics 2007 panel, Congressman Nadler, Congressman Rangel, and others. Then we will have our hip-hop panel at 4. As I get the senator out, his wife called, I have his grocery list to take home. But I want to thank all of our candidates for president that have come. I certainly want to thank Senator Obama, and I hope that all of us will mobilize and do what he says to do. Thank you. I'll see you at the next panel.
Week. So please, no buttons and no signs. Thank you. National Convention. Reverend Sharpton and Senator Obama will be with us shortly. I just wanted to take care of a couple of housekeeping matters. Number one is that National Action Network is a nonprofit civil rights organization that definitely could use your support and help. If you're not a member, we urge you to join. We deal with all kinds of issues in the civil rights movement. So it's not expensive. It's $25, or pay whatever it is that you can afford to pay. We just would love to have your support. We have rallies every Saturday at the House of Justice at 145th Street and Lenox Avenue. So I urge you to consider that at the end of this convention. When, just to give you what the game plan will be, in a few minutes I will come out and I will welcome Reverend Sharpton and Senator Obama to come to the podium. Because several of the television stations are going to be carrying this live, I just wanted you to be aware of that, so that applause and cheers are great, and but just also be respectful so that we can make sure that the program can move as well. But I just wanted you to be aware that that's happening. And again, thank you for coming, and we'll be out shortly, and let's enjoy it. Thank you. To have Congressman Jerry Nadler, who is here with us today. He'll be at the panel. Councilwoman Darlene Neely is here from Brooklyn. She's here with us today. The mayor from Buffalo, Byron Brown, good friend of mine, is joining us as well. Got a strong contingent from Buffalo here in the House. And the Democratic leader for the Senate, Malcolm Smith, will be joining us shortly. So I just wanted to make that statement. But also, when I come out again, just please make sure that everybody is seated when I come out so that we can get the program moving as quickly as possible. The question on the press will be here initially just to take a series of pictures to get what they need to do out of the way first, and then they will move to the back so that you can enjoy Reverend Sharpton and Senator Obama. They won't be in your way.
We have had a very important and impressive convention this week. The Reverend Al Sharpton has led us with clarity and precision, and on the strength of his own engagement in the political arena, we have been fortunate to have all of the candidates of the Democratic Party visit us. It is my pleasure then to present our president, the Reverend Al Sharpton, President of the National Action Network, at this time.
Y'all, these photographers in the front, we really didn't come to see y'all, so y'all. Yeah. First of all, let me thank all of you that have been here all week for the convention, and for all of our delegates. We will hear in a moment from the last of the candidates. We are glad that all of them have come, and let me state, as I've said in presenting all of them, that there must not be different standards in American politics. If it is appropriate, and it is, for John McCain to go and address Reverend Jerry Falwell and his constituency, if it is appropriate, and it is, for Rudolph Giuliani to go to Pat Robertson and his constituency, it should not even be questioned whether Hillary Clinton or John Edwards or Senator Barack Obama ought to come to our convention. We must have a nation that everybody is in the discussion. And let's recognize members of our national board and our chapter leaders around the country. It is my honor to introduce to you a young man. I call him young because we ain't that far apart. In fact, Ed was older than both of us, right? And they called him the young guy. A young man I met several years ago as he began running his race for Senate. And he is a man that has stirred a lot of excitement and passion in the American political establishment, and more important, the masses. As we embark on a new century, it is